Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of TeikaTV. It is January 25th, and today we're here to talk to everyone about growing their brand using headline search ads. So pretty exciting topic for today. I know we've spent a lot of time over the past couple weeks going through sponsored products, but now this is a little bit of a different flavor in the advertising world on Amazon. So as everyone joins, drop in a comment, let us know where you're joining us from, and we'll keep this interactive. So if there are any questions along the way, please do write those in. So I'm Joe Doobie, I'm the host, and I am lucky to be joined today by Will and Gary. Will?
Hey everyone.
Hey, how's it going? If you guys were on the webinar yesterday, you might have heard my voice and Joe's as well, so happy to be live in front of the camera. This is going to be a great episode of TeikaTV.
And Will, what do you do here?
I am the Director of Product Design, so that really ranges from branding to marketing and the actual application itself. So if you've seen the marketing website, that was all me, and I think that's one of the reasons why Joe brought me on today was because I'm everything brand with TeikaMetrics. I'm writing the messaging, I'm creating the photography, I'm sort of defining that look and feel. So I'm excited to share some of my experience here at TeikaMetrics and show how it can kind of translate into the Amazon world.
Yeah, it's going to be great to get Will's perspective on those things like imagery and how you should be connecting with your customers.
Yeah.
And Gary, where do you sit?
I'm on the customer success team here, so a lot of you have probably spoken with me either by phone or by chat. You're probably tired of listening to my voice.
Yes, Gary has been on multiple times. I'm sure everyone recognizes her. So again, as everyone joins, let us know where you're joining in the show today. And what we're going to do is talk about growing your brand on Amazon through using headline search. So we're going to hit on three main topics. So for those of you that are just joining, we're going to hit on what are headline search ads. Number two, how to set them up and what that process looks like for the creative options. And then number three, we'll talk about testing and what it takes to succeed. So I think before we dive into that content, we'll wait for a few more people here to join and hit on a couple of news articles that we've seen over the past week.
Pretty busy week, right?
Yeah, pretty busy week. I mean, it seems like instead of talking with sellers about how they can improve their business, we should be just telling them each week to buy Amazon stock.
Yeah.
I know, really.
Because
the quickest way to get
yeah,
there.
I mean, looking over the last 30 days, it's up over $200, right around $13.75 now.
Yeah.
And over that last 30 days and last year, it's just incredible the amount of growth. And we were just reading an article on CNBC saying that the latest targets are at 1,800, with so plenty of room to grow. A lot of talk around the cloud computing side of Amazon as well as advertising.
I mean, watch out Bitcoin. I think we got a new contender in the space, right?
Yeah. So, it's so interesting to sort of see that growth on Amazon. And looking in the comments now, it looks like we have McKay joining from Utah. John throwing up the TeikaTV hashtag. Good to see those loyal followers. Kevin joining us from California. So thanks to everyone for joining, and let us know as we get into the content what questions you may have around headline search ads. So diving into another story that was all over the news today was the Amazon Go store.
Yeah.
So this was pretty cool, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It seems, I don't know, it seems a little weird.
Well, I was watching one of the late night shows, and he was talking about how Amazon basically made a physical store obsolete. And
Right.
then now they've gone and opened their own physical stores, kind of bringing things full circle.
Right. Everyone
funny.
talks about the retail apocalypse and how
Yeah.
everything's going out of business because it's Amazon's fault, and then Amazon's the one buying those retail stores back.
Yeah, I think the funniest part of this was that people were waiting in line for the shopping experience that's supposed to be lineless.
How ironic, right?
Yes.
There's a huge line, tons of pictures and comments on how it makes no sense to be waiting in line to not wait in line.
But it is true, the future is now. I think that Amazon is pushing something forward which is going to really alter how people shop and experience retail.
It's going to feel really weird walking into a store, picking something up, and walking out. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna feel a little bit like shoplifting.
I feel like I might still feel a little guilty.
Yeah, I know. Right, there was that article that said
Yeah.
someone had stolen a yogurt, and
Yeah.
Amazon said, "Don't worry about it." Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that yogurt is really going to harm Amazon in the long term. It could affect their bottom line, but
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an amazing technology to be able to do that, and Amazon, of course, is at the forefront of all these things, but they're not just online, they're everywhere, and it's showing very quickly that anywhere that they can make an extra dollar, Whole Foods is a good example. They're going to try to break into that market as well, so watch out.
And Amazon's been branching a little bit into pharmaceuticals as well.
Right.
Doing a lot of research in the pharmacy industry, so that could be the next big Amazon
making
avenue.
CVS nervous.
Yeah, for sure.
So, looks like we got a couple more people joining. James from Cambridge, UK. Mateus from Uruguay. Wow, quite a global audience today. Wow. So thanks everyone for joining us. So again, if you're just coming on to the show, we will be diving into headline search ads today and talking about how to grow your brand on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So the last thing we wanted to touch on before getting into that content was just a key date coming up for Amazon sellers, right? Yep. So February 15th, if you guys don't have it marked on your calendars, you should. It's long-term storage fees, right? So it looks like you've got about a couple weeks left to...
Yeah, a couple weeks left. Keep in mind any inventory that's going to be aged 6 months or older come February 15th.
Right, and a couple of things to think about there. You want to be weighing the pros and cons of what to do with that inventory. You know, it may be that you can set up additional sponsored product campaigns to try to liquidate some of that stuff. You may want to process some removal orders if it's just inventory that you're never going to sell. You can also look to sell in other channels, right? You know, maybe on eBay or through Walmart or Jet. So yeah, just a heads up to everyone. Check out your inventory health. Don't let that stick around and get hit with a couple extra $1,000 fee on February 15th. That's just the worst.
Comes up fast.
Right.
Comes up really fast. So.
Right. Awesome. So thanks. So what we're going to do now is dive into the headline search content. And to remind everyone that's just joining, what we'll hit on today is what they are, how you set them up, and then what to do to optimize and test and really get the most out of the platform.
Yeah.
So first, what are headline search ads? Right? They exist right at the top of the search bar. So they're above all of the search results, and they give you an opportunity to create an advertisement that includes content.
Yeah.
So you have that ability to create a tagline, add some imagery, which is something you never had the ability to do in sponsored products.
Right.
But some sellers have been using it for a while, right?
Yeah, so some sellers who have had access to Vendor Central and AMS have been able to use it for a while. Starting in the fall, it became available through Seller Central as well.
Right.
So relatively new compared to AMS.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see sort of as more and more sellers get the ability to use headline search, where we see the trends in terms of the cost and the metrics that we're measuring with our sellers. So we'll get into sort of what that successful campaign looks like. But it is interesting that it is one of the newest forms of advertisement for third-party sellers on Seller Central. And
what's the price on average? How's that changed over like the last few months that it's been around?
Yeah, we've definitely seen it get more competitive. So initially, a couple years ago, when it was just in AMS available to those Vendor Central customers, it was something where there wasn't a ton of competition, and I actually saw some of the most efficient advertising was actually done through that headline search ad type. Yep. But now, over the past couple months, it's definitely gotten a lot more.
I would say consistently, headline search ads have been more expensive per click than sponsored product ads for Seller Central.
Yeah, and I think that brings up an important point of just how to think about them in relation to sponsored products, right? Is they're not the same type of advertising.
Totally different.
Totally different. So sponsored products we see much closer to the end of the funnel, right? They're showing up right in line with the other products that show up in the search results, and it brings you right to that product page. So headline search is a layer above that, right? It's something where when you see that advertisement, it's not going to take you exactly to a product page. It's going to either take you to a custom landing page or an Amazon storefront. So it is a bit removed from that, final one-click purchase.
Right, and very much around the messaging that you're able to do with headline search ads is completely different than sponsored products. The headlines that you can use at its core, can help tell your brand story. They can help people get in and understand what you're selling as a whole, what your message is, what you believe in as a brand, which in such a saturated market on Amazon is even more important than it's ever been. So when I'm thinking about building out those titles and selecting the products, you really want to make sure that you're being creative, like really put your marketing hat on, make people, if you're looking at a billboard, something that really gets you is how witty the message is, what it's trying to portray, what they believe in.
Right.
But at the same time, you want to make sure that you have some very important pieces to it. You want to make sure that you still have some of those search terms that people are going to use to find your products.
Yeah, and you only have 50 characters, right?
Yeah.
So it's not something where you can have a whole paragraph around your products. You want to make it rather direct, but maybe include some creative aspects to it to get that click-through rate up. Yeah. So yeah, as if you're just joining us, we're hitting headline search ads, talking about how to grow your brand on Amazon. Talked a little bit about what headline search ads are, and then now we'll dive into the creative options and what you can do in the setup. But first, I'd love to hear from the audience, and we'll just let the sort of poll run while we're talking, is drop in a 1 in the comments if you've kicked off a headline search ad campaign before and have had experience, and then drop a 0 in the comments if it's not something you've done yet. It'll be interesting to see who's joining the show and what experience you have. So we'll let that air out for a few minutes, but let's dive into the creative options in the setup itself.
Yeah.
So one of the key pieces is that to be eligible for a headline search ad, you actually have to be brand registered.
Yeah, it's impossible to have a headline search ad through Seller Central if you haven't gone through the brand registry process. So that's the first thing you should be doing if you're thinking about setting up headline search ads.
And I know you've had a little experience, Gary, with the brand registry process. What's your typical advice to sellers, and how long it takes, and what the most difficult part is?
Sure. The longest part, the most time-consuming part, is going to be getting your trademark approved. And then once that's done, you need to submit your brand registry application to Amazon. Mm-hmm. That part is relatively short as far as where you spend your time waiting.
Right.
And Amazon's really improved its processing times as well for brand registry applications.
Yeah, and one just quick note there is that this is the second version of brand registry.
Yeah, it's called brand registry 2.0.
Right. So if you've previously, a couple years ago, gone through the brand registry process, you may have to re-up that registry with the newer requirements.
Yeah, there's some additional requirements, like having your own website, and then some additional documentation to submit.
Awesome. Yeah, and thanks to everyone for throwing in those comments. It looks like it's about half and half right now, with people who've had experience with headline search and those who haven't yet set one up. So yeah, keep those 0s and 1s coming in if you've used it before, 0 if you're new. So so after you've got the brand registry, you go in, it's in Campaign Manager, and I think it still has a beta tag next to it,
does,
right?
Yeah.
So it's still not quite a finalized product from Amazon. It's right next to the sponsored product side of things. And when you go through the process, what you'll be doing is selecting that headline that we talked about. So you have 50 characters to play with there. You have a logo or an image that you can select on the left of the text, and then you select 3 different products to show up in that top level.
Correct.
And then this is an interesting one too, is you get to decide where to send that traffic. So when someone clicks on that headline search, you can determine, oh, I'd like to send it to this custom list of ASINs, and this is another difference from sponsored products. This is going to be at the parent level, so you can select at least 3 parents up to, I'm not sure how many, but 3+ parent ASINs on a custom page. But the other option is to send traffic to an Amazon storefront. And Will, I know we were just looking at a couple different examples and talking about the power there.
Yeah, I had been talking about storefronts a few months back, and how this new marketing funnel of sponsored products, HSA, and then HSA into the storefront is an incredibly powerful way to tell your story now. Before, you just have sort of these empty templates where you just have a list of your products. Now you can really use amazing photography. You can pull in some interesting copywriting, which I think is just as important as images are today.
Right.
There's quite the renaissance on writing. People are really sold from that aspect as well. And you can set up whichever kinds of products you want all together to try to tell that narrative a little bit better. So if you're selling something like microwaves and iPhone cords, you're going to obviously separate those things out.
Yeah.
But you might want to talk about, if you're selling iPhone cords or different cords, durability. You can pull in some beautiful graphics. And I would honestly recommend paying for these types of things finding somebody who is a graphic designer, they're generally fairly priced, and using somebody like that, because you're just going to get a much better sort of quality output. And I think that's one of the big things with HSA. If you're not prepared for HSA, you're not prepared for this brand content, I recommend waiting until you are, because oftentimes they'll click on this. If they find something that is, it looks like it was hastily put together, the writing isn't great, there's misspellings, it's not going to make people feel very, compelled to buy something from you, very safe, and trust within brands is absolutely key. So really think about that before you start putting your hard-earned money into HSA.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you've gone through those steps, you've created the landing page, or you've built out your storefront with your images and your text. The next thing to think about is which keyword do you want to be bidding on.
Yep.
Right? So it's similar to sponsored products in that you'll be bidding on a set of keywords. You'll notice that the prices are different. There's not as much reporting available on HSA.
Yeah, it's pretty minimal. You can look at your metrics within the manager itself, but there's not much in the way of downloading reports.
Yeah, there's no bulk downloads or bulk uploads, so it's a bit more manual to manage than sponsored products.
Is that going to stay that way?
I don't think so. I think that's probably why they have the beta tag still on headline search, is because it is still in development, and they're still building out more tools for sellers. And another thing that's limiting is you don't have the power of negative keywords on headline search ads.
Right.
So we talked a lot about negative keywords last week and how powerful they are on the sponsored product side. They just aren't available with headline search. So you have to be careful, and you may want to use more phrase and exact match keywords if you're nervous about spending too much.
Yeah, what I find is starting with broad and phrase, and then as they start to convert, add them in as exact. And then when I'm setting my bids, I try to bid higher on the exact matches and the phrase matches and the broad matches to account for those higher click prices you see on Seller Central, for headline search ads versus sponsored product.
Right. And one of the things we do recommend doing is, because the data is somewhat limited on the headline search ad, is using your sponsored products data to help inform your decisions. So if you're a sponsored products TeikaMetrics optimizer client, you can go to that top contributing keyword list, take a look at what's working the best for you in sponsored products, and make sure you're bidding on it on the headline search side as well.
So, question about this type of stuff. You have tons of different images, you have different taglines that you might want to use. How are people testing this type of stuff, or is this something that people sort of set and forget?
Yeah, great segue. I think that's the third topic for the day. So we've talked about what they are, where they show up, how they're different from sponsored products, gone through that setup process, so brought you through and said select the logos, the images, your tagline. But now that you've got it set up, the third point here is going to be how do you know it's working? What type of testing should you be running? What metrics should you be looking at? And I think one thing to sort of take a step back on is that it is different than sponsored products in that there's a 2-week attribution window, right? So there's 14 days where they'll attribute a click or a sale back to a click. So on sponsored products, you're typically looking at a 7-day period, whereas HSA is 14 days. And it looks like James dropped in a question, will SPO have control over HSA? So asking specifically about the sponsored products optimizer, somewhat limited in terms of the technology that's made available from Amazon, but that is something that we see in the future, the sponsored products optimizer being able to report on and control those headline search ads.
Yeah.
Yep.
Looks like a long question in from Jacqueline. Is it more beneficial to send the ad directly to a product page than to have a lot of 4 to 5 stars customer reviews as compared to the competitors, rather than to the storefront? This way the customers see the number of reviews rather than just a storefront. I think that's a great test to run.
Yeah.
So as we're getting into this testing section, I would have both set up, right? So that, exactly to your point, that list of ASINs is going to show you whichever products you select. It's going to have the reviews right there. People will be able to see how many reviews there are, how many stars there are. But on the storefront, obviously, it's sort of a step removed, where it's more around the imagery and the story of your brand.
Yeah, and I think you can think, I really would, even though there's not stars there, people are going to judge your products by that imagery. Do you have 5-star imagery? Do you have 5-star writing? And that's really, it actually can be an advantage if you're a newer brand and you don't have that many reviews, that people will get this feeling of who you are before they even see you in that natural listing. So
yeah, I absolutely agree.
I think it's a huge advantage if you're new as well.
Yeah, I mean, instead of relying on getting the trust from the reviews numbers, you can put out that professional images
I think
and
the key
story.
is to do it right. As Will was mentioning earlier, a poorly executed storefront is probably not going to be any better for you than a product with no reviews or few reviews. But if you can do it right, then it's a good way to supplement a new product that maybe hasn't picked up traction and hasn't generated feedback yet.
I think, this is, I think what's so exciting about Amazon right now is between sponsored products, between HSA, think about trying to get a product into Walmart. It's going to be almost impossible, and let alone having that at the front of the store as the first thing you walk into. And you're paying, pennies or dollars to get this in front of people. It's really powerful, and it's something that every brand and private label should really think about doing, is this HSA, as long as, of course, your margins can withstand it.
Yep.
So,
yeah, it looks like Jeff was looking for some clarification on the attribution. So what we're saying here is if someone clicks a headline search ad that you're running, Amazon will attribute a sale, any sale over the next 14 days if they buy any product from your brand. So if I click today, but I don't end up checking out with a product from your brand until 10 days later, I will still then get attributed back to that click. So the message there is that you don't want to judge performance too early, right? If I set up a headline search ad today and I check it tomorrow and I've spent $100 and haven't seen a sale, I wouldn't panic yet. You want to be running these for at least 2 weeks to judge the actual conversion and see how many sales come in.
And so it has nothing to do with those 3 products that they select.
No, it's any sale of your brand.
And so what if it's not in the storefront itself?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. Amazon is measuring it if it's any sort of brand sale if they've clicked on your headline search ad. So it is a very broad, it's much more broad than a sponsored products and what we're used to looking at on that side.
Yeah, so going back a little bit to Jacqueline's question earlier, I think this can be a good way for you to maybe drive traffic or more traction for the newer products or the ones that don't have as many reviews.
Right.
Because you lead with your best products, and then you make people comfortable with your brand, familiar with your brand, so they're more willing to buy a product that doesn't have 100 reviews or 200 reviews.
Yeah, great point. And for anyone who's just tuning in now, we're going through headline search ads, talking about what they are, how to set them up, and now going through some testing strategies and how to think about success and what that actually means. So Will, looks like we have a question, another follow-up from Jacqueline around, do you run simultaneous ads on the same products? And yeah, absolutely. I would have several ads running at the same time and try to evaluate that every couple of weeks and see where you are succeeding and where you're outperforming, right? If you're testing, keep everything else constant, but change the headline, or keep everything else constant and drive them to the storefront versus a list of products. And in those experiments, you can then see, where do I see the most success? And what would I look for in terms of success? I would say, I would first look at click-through rate. Right? And click-through rate is one where you don't typically look a lot when you're analyzing sponsored products, but it's much more relevant to me for the headline because it tells me how relevant that ad is to the search and how likely they are to click in and learn more. So I want to really optimize for that click-through rate initially.
Quick question for you, Joe. One second, going back to Jacqueline's question. Would you recommend running sponsored products ad and headline search ads for the same product?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're very different and they're going to show up in different places. I mean, even if you're on the first page for both of those ad types, great. I mean, that just is a sort of, you're defending the real estate there against any competition.
And that's something important to consider, because I get a question a lot, and this is more related with SP, is should I advertise my brand name? Should I have that in there?
Right.
But when you think about it in terms of real estate, then it makes sense if you want to advertise for anything that could possibly result in a customer knowing more about your product.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks for everyone who's joining and commenting in. Hello to Patrick. Dan dropped a question in. I have different messaging behind each one. One targets fashion toward forward folks, and another targets athleisure folks. So I think that's a great way to think about it, is to segment your audience, because they're going to be using different search terms and they're going to be looking for different things from their products. So if you break that down, your customer types, into different groups, I think having a headline search ad that speaks to each one of those customer segments is a great way to start.
Because you can highlight different product features for different customers. So while you don't get to pick the actual demographic that's viewing your ad, by changing your headline or by changing your image to appeal to a different group of people, you can sort of have the same effect.
And you can control too on what keywords you're bidding on.
Exactly.
So for some messages, maybe you don't want to include specific keywords, and others, maybe those are more relevant. So I think that's a good note from Dan, so thanks for writing in.
There's a few strategies as well in testing techniques for titles. One good example I think would be is think about times of the year. So for like the new year, you might do something like New Year, New You with makeup by L'Oreal or something. In other cases, that might be something that's difficult for you to manage over time because it's so specific to a time period that if you forget about that, the ad, we actually just saw somebody with an ad for the new year, and it's almost February.
Yeah, and it was for selling New Year party supply.
Yeah, New Year's Eve party supplies, those are not flying off the shelves anymore.
Yeah, probably not. This is probably liquidation phase,
so
as we say.
That's definitely one of those where if you are doing more time-based or seasonal messages, and I've seen this all over Amazon where it's like gear up for the fall and it's now midwinter. So if you do kick off campaigns like that, stay on top of it so that you're not confusing customers or throwing them off and saying, why am I seeing this?
Testing only works. Go ahead.
It's part of making your brand seem more reliable and more solid as well if you're looking for little details like this.
Right.
That's great. And I mean, testing is only as good as the the rigor that you put into making sure that you see these results. So I definitely think organizing something very much like our own sponsor products sort of template sheet that helps you set up your campaigns, doing something with your own tests as well, time periods, when you want it to end, if it's something that's more indefinite where you just want to, where it's a winner that you've tested and found out and you just want to leave that, that's a good place as well. But really think about, especially with the headlines themselves, people will look at your products, but the first thing they do is they read that text as well. Really understand who your audience is. You're not going to want that New Year, New You with, something that's for like maybe an older segment of people. They're not going to understand that sort of kind of like new Facebook culture type of speak. So really think about who you're targeting, make sure it goes toward them, and then test that out. Try out a whole bunch of different styles, and make sure that you use those search terms. That's really important because otherwise nobody's going to find it, and you're ultimately going to be wasting time and money. So.
Yeah, so when we're doing these types of tests where you're changing a headline or you're changing an image or where it drops the user to after they click, I'm interested, Gary, in your experience, where do you see like the cost per click and the ACOS relative to sponsored products?
Higher.
Yeah. For
the most part. So I've seen cost per clicks, and this is definitely an outlier, but I've seen cost per clicks that have gone as high as $30 for a branded term. So it's definitely a different...
Were they selling Rolexes, I hope?
No, it was a customer that I was speaking with, and it was for his own brand name that he had to spend so much to keep the real estate. So that's definitely an anomaly, but it's possible to get really high cost per click. So you need to sort of recalibrate what you consider normal or not normal and how much you're willing to spend. So if you're just starting off your business, you're more price sensitive, maybe now is not the right time for HSA if you can, withstand those margins. But on the flip side, it is a great way to tell your brand story and make people more comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's definitely a tool where if you're not quite established or don't have a big marketing budget, I would recommend waiting on headline search ads and spending more of my money with sponsored products.
If you have $10 in your marketing budget and it's a strict budget, then spend those $10 on sponsored product ads because you're going to get more out of it probably. And then build up towards HSA.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, as we were saying earlier, it's a little bit higher in that funnel. So you have to think about it more as like closer to a traditional marketing vehicle like a billboard or a television advertisement where it's not purchase now. So
it's more about reach rather than
I would be cautious around getting too aggressive too early if you're just launching your brand.
I like to think of it as more of the hood blimp, actually.
Oh,
myself.
the hood blimp. Yeah.
So it's really far up there, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really prime real estate. And the price is going to continue to go up.
Right.
So take advantage of it now, because a lot of competitors are going to be coming in. If you're in apparel, Nike is going to be in there. In a year, look at those headline search ads. It's going to be Adidas. It's going to be Nike. So this is your time to really get in at a fraction of the cost.
Yep.
It looks like another question coming in from Jacqueline. Do you have to physically copy each term from one campaign to the new ad campaign, or is there a way to mirror? No, unfortunately, you do have to input them. You can have them in a sheet and copy and paste as long as they're on a separate line.
Yeah, what you can actually do, Jacqueline, you have the option of copying an existing campaign and then just working with it there, and that'll retain the terms as well. So it's a good option to do it.
And you do, anytime you create or make an adjustment, create a copy, you do have to submit it for approval again,
You do have to
right?
submit it for approval, but you can retain any keywords you've already added on. So if all you want to do is test the same keywords against different copy, you could just copy an existing campaign, work with the draft, and then resubmit to Amazon.
Yeah, and when it first came out in Seller Central, we were seeing that time from submission to approval be like 7 days, but that's I think drastically
it's really,
shrunk.
I see same-day approval sometimes, so it's pretty quick turnaround. Before the holidays, I saw maybe a little bit more of a lag, but recently it's been pretty quick turnaround to get your ads up and running. You just have to be really careful because there are some guidelines around capitalization, using colloquialism, things like that. So you need to be a little bit careful there.
Special characters. You can't do any claims like best or things like that, right? Awesome. So yeah, thanks to everyone for joining. What we'll do now is just wrap up the conversation, sort of recap what we learned today, and then send everyone on their way. So I think just to recap the headline search, starting at the beginning, what is it? It's a vehicle of advertising on Amazon where you can get that top placement above the search results. You get flexibility on your actual ad copy, your imagery, and you can select where to send that traffic. We talked about how to create those and what those steps were in Seller Central, and it walks you right through sort of that wizard of steps 1 through 4, I believe. And at this time, there are no bulk options, so it is something that you do one by one. But to Gary's point, once you do have some created, you can copy them over to a new campaign.
Yep.
And then once you have those campaigns set up, we encourage everyone to do some testing. Keep in mind, there's that 2-week attribution window. So you want to run at least for 14 days before you make any final decisions, and test different copy. I think it was a great idea by Dan, who was talking about having different messages for different types of customers. So break out your customer base, have a message exclusively to them, and see how that works.
And really think about your brand story. Think about the narrative that you want prospective customers to see. Keep that consistent, keep your quality high, and I'm sure you will see results. So
yeah, and measure those key metrics. Look at your click-through rate, look at your spend and your ACOS, and make those judgments on what's working and what's not. It may not be the case that headline search is going to be profitable for everyone, but it may be somewhere where you want to spend those extra marketing dollars to get that awareness. So thanks to everyone for joining today. As always, if it's Thursday, it's TeikaTV, so we'll see you back here, same place, same time next week. Thanks everyone.
Thanks for joining.
See you later.